I honestly believed I had finally earned a ceasefire with Celeste, but then I opened the nightstand drawer and found the packet. 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You. It wasn't a note. It was a dossier, complete with bullet points, timestamps, and details of private conversations I barely remembered. My hands didn't shake, and I didn't cry. I froze, realizing my mother-in-law hadn't just written a list of complaints. She had drafted her own confession. Waverly Glen always smelled like burning leaves and expensive cedar mulch. No matter the season, it was a smell that used to signal safety to me. The scent of established money and quiet neighborhoods where nothing bad ever happened. Now, 3 years into my marriage to Ethan, that scent triggered a low-level nausea that sat at the base of my throat like a swallowed stone. Ethan reached across the center console of our sedan and squeezed my hand. His palm was warm, his grip reassuring, but his eyes stayed fixed on the winding road that led up the hill to his mother's estate. "You are going to be fine," he said. "It is just a weekend, 2 dinners, 1 breakfast, and we are out." I forced a smile, looking at my reflection in the passenger window. I looked put together. I had worn the navy silk blouse Celeste had complimented 2 Christmases ago, and I had left my work phone in my bag in the trunk to avoid any accusations of being distracted. I was 33 years old. I was a senior project manager for a logistics firm. I managed budgets in the millions and navigated union negotiations without blinking. Yet, the moment we passed the wrought iron gates of the Cole family home, I felt like a teenager hiding a report card. "She has been better lately," Ethan added, though his voice lacked conviction. "She really liked the birthday gift you sent. She liked that it was cashmere," I corrected gently. "She did not like the color. She told me it washed her out." Ethan sighed, the sound of a man who loved his wife but feared his mother. "She is just particular. Maddie. That is all. Particular was one word for it. Predatory was another." Celeste Cole was standing on the porch as we pulled up, framed by the white columns of the house like a portrait of matriarchal grace. She was 62 but looked a decade younger, maintained by Pilates, green juice, and the revitalizing power of judging others. She wore a cream cardigan that cost more than my first car, and her smile was bright, sharp, and terrifyingly welcoming. "Madeline." She called out before I had even fully exited the car. She descended the stairs with open arms. "You look robust. Have you been eating more carbohydrates?" "It looks good on you." Fills out the face. "Thank you." "Celeste," I said, accepting the stiff hug. She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and hairspray. Ethan got the warm embrace, the lingering hand on the cheek. "My handsome boy," she cooed. "You look thin. Is she feeding you?" "We cook together." "Mom," Ethan said, grabbing our overnight bags. Celeste's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. "Of course. Modern marriage. It is so fascinating how you young people blur the lines. Come in. I have had the housekeeper air out the guest suite. The dinner that night was a masterclass in polite humiliation. The dining room was dimly lit. The mahogany table set with silver that had been in the Cole family since the 1800s. We were joined by Ethan's Aunt Marjorie, a quiet woman who mostly focused on her soup, and a cousin I barely knew who spent the meal checking his watch. Celeste sat at the head of the table, conducting the conversation like an orchestra. She asked about my job, but only to highlight the hours. "So, you are still traveling to the distribution center twice a week?" she asked, cutting her steak with surgical precision. "Yes, it is a busy quarter," I said, taking a sip of the red wine she had poured. "We are expanding the western region. It must be exhausting," she said, leaning forward with feigned sympathy. "I was telling Marjorie just yesterday. I do not know how Madeline does it. Maintaining a home is a full-time job. To try and have a career on top of it, well, something has to suffer. Does it not? Usually the husband." Ethan cleared his throat. "I am not suffering. Mom, Madeline just got a promotion. We are celebrating." Celeste smiled, a tight tightening of the lips. "Oh, I know. I am just saying, Ethan, that a home needs a heartbeat. If everyone is chasing promotions, Who is changing the sheets? I bit the inside of my cheek. We have a cleaning service. Celeste. Her eyebrows shot up. Oh, a stranger in the house. Well, if you are comfortable with that. The entire evening followed this rhythm. Every success I mentioned was reframed as a neglect of my domestic duties. Every affection Ethan showed me was treated as a sign of his naivety. By the time we excused ourselves to the guest suite on the second floor, my jaw ached from clenching it. I hate this, I whispered as I closed the heavy oak door of the bedroom. The room was beautiful, decorated in shades of eggshell and pale blue, but it felt cold. Ethan sat on the edge of the four-poster bed and loosened his tie. She was not that bad. Maddie, she actually complimented your blouse. She said it was a brave color choice for my complexion. I reminded him, that is not a compliment. You read too much into it, he said, standing up to kiss my forehead. I'm going to jump in the shower. Just relax. We leave tomorrow after lunch. He disappeared into the ensuite bathroom, and the sound of the water running filled the silence. I sat in the wingback chair by the window. Looking out at the dark expanse of the lawn, I felt heavy, not tired, but weighed down. I wanted to read something to distract myself, but I had left my Kindle in the car. I stood up and walked over to the nightstand on my side of the bed. Usually, Celeste stocked the guest rooms with magazines, Architectural Digest or Vogue, and I hoped for something mindless. I opened the drawer. There were no magazines. There was only a single, thick document. It was stapled in the top left corner, sitting squarely in the center of the empty drawer. It looked like a contract or a manuscript. I reached in and pulled it out. The paper was heavy, expensive stock. I held it under the bedside lamp. The title was centered in bold, 20-point font. 47 Reasons. My son should divorce you. I stared at the words. I blinked, waiting for them to rearrange themselves into something benign. Something like 47 recipes for the modern kitchen, but the words stayed. 47 Reasons. My son should divorce you. My breath hitched. I looked at the bathroom door. The shower was still running. I looked back at the document. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me, the kind of calm that comes before a car crash when you realize the brakes are not working. I turned the page. It was formatted like a legal brief. There was a table of contents. There were headings: financial irresponsibility, emotional instability, social embarrassment, lack of domestic aptitude. I felt sick. This was not a note scrawled in anger. This was a project. I began to read. Reason number 1. She prioritizes her career over your well-being. See attached schedule analysis from September. Reason number 2. She is financially reckless with small sums, indicating an inability to manage larger estates. I flipped further. The list was not just vague insults. It was terrifyingly specific. Reason number 17. On October 4th, she purchased a latte and a scone at the Daily Grind at 10:15 in the morning, despite having coffee at home. Cost, $14.50. This pattern is repeated 3 times a week. Annual waste, $2,000. I froze. October 4th. That was a Tuesday. I remembered that day because I had been crying in my car after a brutal meeting, and I had bought the scone as a comfort. How did she know that? How did she know the exact time? I kept reading, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Reason number 23. She was overheard complaining about your mother to a coworker named Tessa Rourke on November 12th at 1:30 in the afternoon. Quote, she is suffocating me. I gasped. I had said that to Tessa at lunch. We were at a restaurant near my office, 30 minutes away from Waverly Glen. We were in a booth in the back. Someone had been watching me. I flipped the pages faster, my eyes scanning the bullet points. Reason number 30. She has a history of medical anxiety. See appointment logs for Dr. Evans, gynecologist. 3 visits in 1 month. I felt violated. I had gone to Dr. Evans because I had a scare. I had not even told Ethan the details, just that everything was fine. And then I saw it. Reason number 34. Reason number 34. She manipulates you emotionally to get her way. Reference the argument on December 2nd regarding the ski trip. She used tears to coerce you into canceling. I stopped breathing. The argument on December 2nd. We were in our bedroom. The door was closed. I had not used tears to coerce him. I had been crying because I was exhausted, and Ethan had decided to cancel the trip on his own. But the terrifying part was that she knew we had argued about the ski trip on that specific night. She was not just judging me from afar. She was inside my life. I heard the shower water shut off. Panic flared. I wanted to hide the packet. I wanted to burn it. But a colder, sharper instinct took over. If I destroyed it, it was just my word against hers. This was evidence. I grabbed my phone from the bedspread. I opened the camera app. My hands were steady now, driven by a cold fury I had never felt before. I took a photo of the cover. I flipped the page. Click. Next page. Click. I photographed every single page. 47 reasons, 47 insults, 47 violations of my privacy. The bathroom door handle turned. I quickly closed the packet and shoved it back into the drawer, sliding it shut just as Ethan walked out. A towel wrapped around his waist, steam billowing behind him. He looked soft and happy, his hair wet and messy. "Hey," he said, rubbing his face. "You okay? You look pale." I looked at him. I looked at the man I loved, the man who laid in bed with me every night, and for the first time, I wondered what he had told her, or if he was as blind as I was. "I am fine," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "Just a headache." He sat next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. "I told you. The air here is dry. Drink some water." I looked at the drawer. I needed to know. "Ethan," I said quietly, "do you remember December 2nd? He frowned. "December 2nd? I do not know. Why? The night we decided not to go on the ski trip?" His face tightened slightly. "Yeah, I remember. We fought. Did you tell your mother about that?" He pulled back, looking confused. "No. Why would I tell her that? It was personal. Did you tell anyone?" "No. Maddie." I felt bad enough that we were fighting. I did not go running to my mommy. "Why are you asking?" I took a breath. I reached for the drawer handle. "Open this," I said. He looked at me, then at the drawer. He reached out and pulled it open. He saw the packet. He saw the title. 47 Reasons. My son should divorce you. He stared at it for a long second, his brain refusing to process the words. Then he let out a short, nervous laugh. "What is this? A joke?" "Read it," I said. He picked it up. His wet fingers left a small mark on the cover. He flipped it open. He read the first page. His smile faded. He read the second page. His brow furrowed. This is insane," he muttered. "Why would she write this?" "Keep reading." I said, "Look at reason 34. He flipped to the page. He read it. His face went white. The ski trip. He whispered, "You did not tell her?" I asked, watching him closely. "No," he said, looking at me with genuine horror. "I swear to you, Maddie, I never told her. How does she know this?" He looked at the packet again, his hands starting to shake. "This says I canceled because you cried. That is not what happened. I canceled because I knew we could not afford it." "She has rewritten it," I said, "but she has the date right. And the topic?" Ethan stood up. The packet clutched in his hand. "I am going to talk to her. Right now. This is sick." He turned toward the door, anger radiating off him. "Stop," I commanded. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. "Maddie, she cannot do this. She is tracking you. If you go down there now," I said, standing up and walking to him, "she will cry. She will say she was just worried. She will say she wrote it in a moment of panic and forgot to throw it away. She will make herself the victim, and you, being the good son you are, will eventually forgive her because you do not want to believe your mother is a monster." He looked at me, conflict warring in his eyes. "So what? We just ignore it?" "No," I said, taking the packet from his hand. "We do not ignore it. We put it back." "Put it back?" "Exactly where we found it." I walked over to the nightstand and placed the document back in the center of the drawer, aligning it perfectly. She wants me to find this, I said. She put it in the guest room. She knows we are the only ones who stay here. If I scream, I look unstable. If I cry, I look weak. If I demand a divorce, she wins. I closed the drawer. We are going to go to sleep, I said, and tomorrow at breakfast, we are going to see what she does. Ethan looked at the drawer, then at me. He looked terrified. I do not think I can look at her. Maddie, you have to, I said, because if you do not, I will leave, and not because of the list, but because I need to know if I am married to a man or a boy. We did not sleep well. Ethan tossed and turned, murmuring in his sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house. The list replayed in my mind. The coffee, the doctor, the argument. Someone was watching. At 7 a.m, sunlight flooded the room. It felt mocking. I got up, showered, and dressed in stiff trousers and a high-collared shirt. Armor. We went down to breakfast. The breakfast nook was a sun-drenched alcove off the kitchen, overlooking the rose garden. Celeste was already seated, drinking tea. She looked fresh, rested, and serene. Good morning. Sleepers, she chirped. There are pastries on the sideboard, and fruit. Ethan walked in like he was walking onto a minefield. He mumbled a good morning and poured himself coffee, his hand trembling slightly. I sat directly across from Celeste. Good morning. Celeste, I said. My voice was steady. She looked at me over the rim of her teacup. Her eyes were blue, pale and icy. Did you sleep well? The mattress in that room is new. I wanted to make sure it was firm enough. It was very illuminating. I said. She paused. The cup hovered an inch from her saucer. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her mouth. Good, she said. I always say, clarity is the most important thing in a home. She took a sip of tea. Ethan stared at his plate, pushing a melon ball around with his fork. I buttered a piece of toast. I hear the weather is going to turn. I said. Celeste watched me. She was waiting. She wanted the explosion. She wanted me to throw the toast, to scream about the list, to wave the packet in the air so she could look at Ethan and say, see, she is hysterical. She is unstable. Reason number 4. I took a bite of toast. Celeste set her cup down. You know, Madeline, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Becoming intimate and dangerous. I was reading an article the other day. It said that sometimes people stay in situations simply because they lack the courage to see the facts. Is that so? I asked. Yes. It said that some truths are easier to read than to say. Do you not agree? She held my gaze. It was a challenge. She was telling me she knew I had found it. She was daring me to acknowledge it. I looked at her. I saw the smugness in her jaw. I saw the certainty that she had won, that she had crushed me with 47 bullet points. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. I think, I said slowly, that some fiction is very poorly written. The smile on her face faltered for a fraction of a second. I beg your pardon? She asked. I think we should hit the road. Ethan, I said. Standing up, I have a lot of work to do. Ethan scrambled up, relieved to be escaping. Yes, right. We should go. Celeste stood up, looking confused. She had expected a fight. She had expected tears. She had not expected boredom. Leaving so soon? She asked. I walked over to her. I did not hug her. I stood close enough that she could smell my perfume, a scent she had once told me was too aggressive. Thank you for the hospitality. Celeste, I said, it was an educational weekend. I turned and walked out the front door, my heels clicking on the marble foyer. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Ethan was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. She is crazy. Maddie, he finally said. She is actually crazy. I did not answer. I was scrolling through the photos on my phone. I zoomed in on the last page of the document, in the bottom right corner, barely visible against the white paper. There was a faint gray mark, a watermark. It was a logo, a stylized letter L intertwined with a vine. and tiny text underneath, "The Gilded Press, Waverly Glen." I knew that shop. It was a high-end boutique printer on Main Street. They did wedding invitations and bespoke stationery. Celeste had not typed this up on her home computer and printed it on her inkjet. She had gone to a professional printer. She had handed over a file containing my medical records, my financial data, and my private conversations, and she had paid someone to format it, print it on heavy cardstock, and bind it. She had made my destruction a business transaction. I looked out the window at the passing trees. The fear was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had given me a list of 47 reasons. But she had made a mistake. She thought she was handing me a verdict, but she had actually handed me a map. Every date was a breadcrumb. Every accusation was a lead. If she knew I bought coffee on October 4th, she had a source. If she knew about the argument on December 2nd, she had a listening device or a leak. I turned off my phone screen. "Drive," I said to Ethan. He looked at me. "Where?" "Home," I said. "I have some reading to do." Celeste Cole wanted a divorce. She wanted a war. She was going to get one, but she was not going to like the ending. The bell above the door of the Gilded Press chimed with a polite, expensive tinkling sound. The shop smelled of fresh ink and heavy cotton paper, a scent that usually signaled weddings and baby showers, the joyful milestones of a well-curated life. Today, it smelled like a crime scene. I walked to the counter, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I was wearing my work armor, a charcoal blazer, a silk camisole, and an expression of pleasant, vacuous anticipation. I needed to look like a woman who had never seen a dossier titled 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You. I needed to look like a customer. A young woman with a sleek ponytail and a name tag that read, Chloe looked up from a computer screen. She smiled. The professional brightness of someone used to dealing with high-maintenance brides. "Good morning," she chirped. "How can I help you?" "Good morning," I said, leaning my designer handbag on the counter. "I am hoping you can help me out of a bit of a bind. My mother-in-law, Celeste Cole, had some printing done here recently for a family project. A bound document?" Chloe's eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, Mrs. Cole? Yes, of course. She is one of our best clients." I forced a chuckle. "She certainly loves her stationery. The thing is, she printed a booklet for us, a family history compilation, and I seem to have spilled coffee on my copy. I was hoping to get a reprint done as a surprise. So I do not have to confess my clumsiness to her. Do you still have the file on hand?" I held my breath. This was the gamble. If Celeste had just walked in with a USB drive and paid cash, I was dead in the water. Chloe tapped on her keyboard. "Let me check. Was it under her personal account or the business account?" "Business account?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Yes, she usually bills through her consulting firm for the bulk jobs. It helps with the tax filing. I assume." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. Celeste had been a housewife for 40 years. She did not have a consulting firm. I am not sure. I lied. "Try the business one?" Chloe clicked the mouse. "Here it is. Larkspur Consulting Group, job number 4029. The file name is..." She squinted at the screen. Then her face went blank. She looked up at me, her professional smile faltering. "The file name is Cole Family Review," she said, her voice tight. "That is the one," I said, my heart hammering. "Could you just print one copy? I can pay for it right now." "I am sorry," Chloe said, her demeanor suddenly shifting to guarded. "The Larkspur account has a strict privacy flag. Only authorized signatories can request reprints. It is a standing order." "I see," I said. "And who is the authorized signatory? Just Celeste?" She nodded. "Celeste Cole and the registered agent. I cannot release it. I am really sorry." I waved a hand, dismissing the rejection. "Oh, do not worry about it. I will just face the music and tell her I ruined it. You know how mothers-in-law are." I turned to leave, my mind racing. Larkspur Consulting Group. As I reached the door, Chloe called out, "You might want to check with the billing address if you need to send a formal request." We send all the invoices to the suite on Elm Street. Thank you. Chloe, I said, you have been very helpful. I walked out into the sunshine of downtown Waverly Glen. But the world felt gray. Celeste had not just printed a list of insults, she had created a legal entity to do it. I sat in my car and pulled up the Secretary of State business registry on my phone. My fingers flew across the screen. Search. Larkspur Consulting Group. There it was. Formed 6 months ago. Status. Active. Principal address. 420 Elm Street. Suite B. I knew Elm Street. It was a strip of commercial buildings near the highway. I drove there, parking across the street. Suite B was not an office. It was a private mailbox center. One of those places where you can rent a box that looks like a legitimate suite number. Celeste was hiding. She had created a shell company to process the paperwork of my destruction. Why? People do not create LLCs to write mean letters to their daughters-in-law. They create LLCs to move money, to hide assets, or to establish a paper trail that looks professional to a judge. She was not just trying to break up my marriage. She was building a case. I needed a war room. I drove straight to Tessa Rourke's house. Tessa had been my best friend since college. She was a forensic accountant, a woman who looked at chaos and saw spreadsheets. If anyone could help me dissect a 47-point indictment, it was her. I sat at her kitchen island, the photos of the dossier displayed on my iPad. Tessa stood over my shoulder, a glass of wine in her hand. Even though it was only 2 p.m. on a Saturday, Jesus, Tessa whispered, scrolling through the images. This is not a mother-in-law. Maddie, this is the KGB. She zoomed in on reason number 12. She fails to support your professional network. Note, refused to host the Rotary Mixer in August. She refused to host that because she had the flu. Tessa snapped. I remember. I brought you soup. Exactly, I said. But look at how it is phrased. Refused. It implies defiance, not illness. Tessa pulled a legal pad toward her. Okay, we are not going to cry about this. We are going to audit it. She drew a line down the center of the yellow paper. On the left, she wrote, emotional garbage. On the right, she wrote, actionable threats. We need to separate the noise from the signal. Tessa said, reason number 1. She does not fold towels right. Garbage. Subjective. A judge will laugh at that. Reason number 5. She is cold to your cousins. Garbage. Hearsay. She scrolled down, her face hardening. But this, she said, pointing to reason number 20. She is financially irresponsible with joint assets. That is not garbage. That is a legal claim. If she convinces Ethan or a court that you are draining the marital estate, she can impact the settlement. I felt a wave of nausea. I earn more than Ethan. I said, I pay the mortgage. I pay the insurance. How can she claim I am irresponsible? Because facts do not matter if the narrative is loud enough. Tessa said, we need to disprove this, line by line. We spent the next 4 hours dissecting the list. It was grueling. It felt like performing an autopsy on my own life. Celeste had twisted everything. A dinner where I was quiet became social isolation. A purchase of a nice handbag became reckless spending. A night I worked late became suspected infidelity. But then we hit reason number 42. Reason number 42, she engages in radical political activism that endangers your family's reputation. See attached donation receipt to the Anarchist Collective for $500. Dated January 15th. I stared at the screen. What? I said. I never donated to an Anarchist Collective. I do not even know what that is. Tessa frowned. January 15th. That was last week. I pulled up my banking app. I searched my transactions. Nothing. I checked my personal credit card. Nothing. Wait, Tessa said. Look at the screenshot she attached in the dossier. I zoomed in on the photo of the receipt Celeste had included. It was a digital receipt. The last 4 digits of the card used were 4491. I do not have a card ending in 4491. I said. Tessa looked at me, her eyes wide. Check your credit report. Now. I opened the credit monitoring app on my phone. The little wheel spun, mocking me. My score popped up. It had dropped 30 points since I last checked. I clicked on Open Accounts. There it was. A credit card opened 3 months ago. Balance? $4,000. I clicked on the details. The billing address was not our house. It was an address on the other side of town. 88 Oak Street. Apartment 4C. I felt the blood drain from my face. I have never lived on Oak Street. I whispered. Tessa grabbed my hand. Maddie, this is not just her being a witch. This is identity theft. She, or someone she is working with, opened a card in your name, used it to make donations that would make you look unstable to your corporate employers, and had the bills sent to a dummy address so you would not see them. I sat back, the room spinning. Why? Why go to this length? Because, Tessa said, her voice grim, if you are divorced for cause, for instability, for recklessness, maybe it triggers something in a prenup you do not know about. Or maybe she just wants to make sure that when she destroys you, you lose your job too. I drove home that evening feeling like a stranger in my own life. The house looked the same, the manicured lawn, the warm light in the windows, but it felt like a stage set. Ethan was in the kitchen, cooking pasta. He looked up as I entered, a hopeful smile on his face. Hey, he said, I made carbonara, your favorite. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had promised to love and cherish. He looked so innocent, but innocence was becoming a liability. Ethan, I said, placing my purse on the counter, we need to talk. He flinched. The smile vanished. About the list? Maddie. I told her. I called her today and told her it was inappropriate. She cried. She said she was just worried about us and got carried away. It is not just a list. Ethan, I said. I pulled out my phone and showed him the credit report. Someone opened a credit card in my name. They are using it to make donations to groups that could get me fired. And the billing address is on Oak Street. Ethan squinted at the phone. Maybe it is a mistake. Identity theft happens all the time. It is probably just some hacker. I looked him in the eye. The donation was listed in your mother's dossier. Ethan, she cited it as a reason for divorce. How would she know about a fraudulent charge on a secret credit card unless she knew the card existed? Ethan wiped his hands on a dish towel. Looking away, you are reaching... Maddie, you are trying to pin a crime on my mother. She is controlling. Yes, she is difficult, but she would never do anything illegal. She is a respected woman in this town. His defense was automatic. It was the knee-jerk reaction of a man who had spent 35 years being told his mother was a saint. I am not reaching, I said, my voice rising. She is using a shell company called Larkspur Consulting. She is building a case. Ethan, and you are letting her. I am not letting her do anything, he shouted, slamming the towel down. I am trying to keep the peace. You are both impossible. She is in my ear all day crying about how you hate her, and you come home and accuse her of felonies. I just want to have dinner. He turned away, and as he did, I saw him slide his phone off the counter and into his pocket. It was a smooth, unconscious movement. Why did you hide your phone? I asked. I did not hide it, he said, his face flushing. I just put it in my pocket. Let me see it. I said, no, he said, stepping back. This is ridiculous. I am not showing you my phone like I am a teenager. If you have nothing to hide, let me see the text thread with your mother. I said no. Madeline! The silence that followed was louder than the shouting. He had never called me Madeline in anger before. It was always Maddie. Madeline was what Celeste called me. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not eat the carbonara. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door. I did not cry. I sat at my desk and wrote down everything that had happened. The print shop, the shell company, the credit card, the phone. I needed to understand the enemy. I knew Celeste, but I did not know the history. I needed a historian. The next day, I called Marjorie Cole. Ethan's aunt was the black sheep of the family, mostly because she refused to dye her gray hair and lived in a condo instead of a manor. She agreed to meet me at a garden center cafe on the edge of town, a place full of ferns and humidity. She was potting a small succulent when I sat down. She looked at me over her reading glasses. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Madeline," she said, dusting dirt off her hands. "I have seen a list." I said, 47 reasons. Marjorie sighed. She did not look surprised. She picked up her tea. "Ah. The dossier. I was wondering when that would appear. You know about it?" "I know the format," she said. "She did it to me 20 years ago. And to her brother before that." I leaned in. "Why?" "Control," Marjorie said simply. "Celeste cannot handle variables. People are variables. If she cannot control you with money or guilt, she creates a file. She collects data, real, imagined, fabricated, and she weaponizes it. She did it to me when I tried to sell my shares in the family trust. She produced a document claiming I was mentally incompetent. It took me 2 years and $50,000 in legal fees to disprove it. My stomach churned. She tried to have you declared incompetent? She is thorough, Marjorie said. And she is telling everyone the narrative already. You know that, right? What narrative? Marjorie took a sip of tea. I saw Cousin Eleanor at the market yesterday. The story is that you are keeping Ethan away from the family, that you are isolating him. And, this is the new part, that you are spending his inheritance. I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. Spending his inheritance? Marjorie. I pay for everything. Ethan's salary goes to his student loans and his car. I bought the house. Does the family know that? Marjorie asked. I do not talk about money. It is tacky. Celeste talks about money. Marjorie said. She tells people what she wants them to believe. She says you are bleeding him dry. She is preloading the jury. Madeline, by the time she drops the bomb, everyone will already believe you are the villain. I felt a cold sweat. It was a smear campaign, a slow-motion character assassination. How do I stop her? I asked. Marjorie looked at me with pity. You do not stop her. You survive her. And the only way to do that is to stop playing by the rules of polite society. She relies on your manners. Madeline, she relies on you being too classy to fight back. I left the garden center with a succulent I did not want and a terrifying clarity. Marjorie was right. I had been trying to be the good daughter-in-law. I had been trying to de-escalate, but you cannot de-escalate a sniper. I went to work on Monday morning with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. My office was usually my sanctuary, a place of logic and clear deliverables. But as I walked to my desk, I felt the eyes of my coworkers on me. Was I paranoid? Or had Celeste's whispers reached here too? I sat down and unlocked my computer. There was an envelope on my keyboard. It was plain white, no return address. My name was typed on the front. I picked it up. It felt light. I used my letter opener to slit the top. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not on the thick, expensive stock Celeste used. It was cheap copy paper, and the font was different. Courier New. It read, Reason number 48. If you push back, you will regret it. I stared at the paper. This was not Celeste's voice. Celeste was elegant in her cruelty. She used legal terms and passive-aggressive framing. Reason number 48 was a thug's threat. It was direct. It was violent. This was not Celeste, or at least, not Celeste alone. I looked around the open-plan office. People were typing, drinking coffee, laughing. Anyone could have placed this here. A cleaning crew member, a security guard, a coworker. I turned the paper over. Nothing. I held it up to the light. No watermark. My hands started to tremble. This was an escalation. They knew I had found the list. They knew I was investigating. I thought about the Larkspur Consulting Shell Company. I thought about the credit card fraud. I thought about Ethan hiding his phone. I was not just fighting a mother-in-law. I was fighting a network. I placed the note in a plastic document protector and slid it into my bag. I did not call Ethan. I did not call Tessa. I picked up my office phone and dialed the number for the building's security office. This is Madeline Coleman in Suite 300, I said. My voice ice cold. I need to request the security camera footage for my floor from the last 12 hours. Why? The guard asked. Because, I said, staring at the empty white envelope, I have a stalker, and I am done being polite about it. I hung up the phone. The investigation was over. The war had officially begun. And if Celeste Cole wanted to play with dossiers, she was about to learn that two could play that game. I was going to find out who printed this note. I was going to find out who opened that credit card. And I was going to find out exactly what Ethan was hiding in his pocket. I opened a new document on my computer. I typed a heading. The counterfile. Evidence against Celeste Cole. Item number 1. The threat. I hit save. The cursor blinked. Waiting. It looked like a heartbeat. I was ready. The white envelope with reason number 48 sat on my desk like a landmine. I had not opened it again since the security guard logged it as evidence. The footage had been inconclusive. A figure in a janitorial uniform, face obscured by a cap, sliding it onto my keyboard at 6 a.m. It was a dead end, or at least a delayed lead. But the fear I had felt in the parking lot was gone. It had burned off, leaving behind a cold, hard curiosity. Violence, even the threat of it, is rarely just about emotion. It is usually about leverage, and leverage, in families like the Coles, is usually about money. I stopped assuming Celeste was just a jealous mother protecting her cub. That was too small. Jealousy does not incorporate shell companies. Jealousy does not open fraudulent credit cards. Jealousy does not hire a boutique print shop to manufacture a 47-point dossier. This was a transaction. I called Marjorie Cole again. I needed to see the ledger. We met at her condo this time. It was a sharp contrast to Celeste's estate. Marjorie lived in a modern, glass-walled apartment downtown, filled with abstract art and books. It smelled of sage and old paper. I need to know about the money. Marjorie, I said, skipping the pleasantries as I sat on her leather sofa. Not the allowance Celeste gives Ethan for his birthday. The real money. The structure. Marjorie poured 2 cups of black coffee. She sat opposite me, her face grave. She looked tired. I wondered when you would ask. She said, "Is there a trust?" I asked. "There is always a trust. Madeline, the Cole Heritage Trust. My father set it up in the 1970s to avoid estate taxes. When my brother died, Ethan's father, control did not pass to Ethan. It passed to Celeste. But she is the wife," I said. "Usually, it goes to the bloodline." Marjorie smiled grimly. "My brother was a weak man, much like his son. He signed over administrative control to Celeste a year before he died. She is listed as the temporary administrator, a title she has held for 15 years. She has total discretion over distributions. And does Ethan have a stake? He is the primary beneficiary," Marjorie said. "But there are conditions." "What conditions?" Marjorie stood up and walked to a bookshelf. She pulled out a thick binder, dusty and worn. She flipped through it until she found a tab marked Beneficiary Clauses. She handed the binder to me. Read paragraph 14. Subsection B. I looked at the dense legal text. My eyes scanned the legalese until I found the clause. Upon the beneficiary attaining the age of 35, a lump sum distribution of $2 million shall be released from the corpus of the trust, provided that the beneficiary is unencumbered by marital claims or has executed a binding asset protection agreement approved by the administrator. I read it twice. Unencumbered by marital claims. I looked up at Marjorie. Ethan turns 35 in 4 months. She nodded. If he is married to you without a prenup, which I know you do not have, the money stays in the trust. Celeste keeps control. If he is divorced, or if he signs a waiver, the money is released to him. My stomach dropped. It was not just about hating me. It was about $2 million. If we stay married, I said, slowly piecing it together. Celeste loses her leverage over him, or rather, she has to hand over $2 million to a couple she cannot control. But if we divorce, he gets the money. Marjorie finished, and she gets her son back, alone, dependent, and rich enough to be grateful. It was so simple. It was so ugly. The dossier, the 47 reasons, was not a list of grievances. It was a portfolio of evidence designed to prove that our marriage was a liability. She was building a case to prove that I was a financial risk, a danger to the corpus of the trust. Can she actually withhold the money if we stay married? I asked. She has discretion, Marjorie said. She can argue that your spending habits, those fake credit card debts she is manufacturing, threaten the family legacy. She can claim you are a predator. She can lock that money up until Ethan is 50 if she wants to, unless he leaves you. I handed the binder back. Thank you. Marjorie, be careful. Madeline, she said, her voice low. $2 million makes people do terrible things. Celeste is not just protecting the money. She is protecting her relevance. Without that trust, she is just a lonely widow in a big house. With it, she is the queen. I left Marjorie's apartment and drove straight to the office of Nolan Vance. Tessa had found him. He was not a shark in a billboard suit. He was a quiet, bookish man in his 50s who specialized in high-net-worth family disputes. His office was in a converted brownstone, lined with oak paneling. Tessa met me there. She had brought a copy of the credit report and the dossier photos I had sent her. Nolan Vance sat behind his desk, reviewing the pictures of the 47 reasons on his tablet. He did not look shocked. He looked like a mechanic inspecting a familiar engine trouble. It is a constructive case, Nolan said, taking off his glasses. Constructive? I asked. He nodded. It is a legal term. She is constructing a narrative of incompetence. Look at the headings. Financial instability, emotional volatility, social alienation. These map perfectly to the arguments one would make in a custody battle or a competency hearing. But we do not have children. I said, not yet, Nolan said, but if you did, this document would be Exhibit A. However, given what you told me about the trust, this is likely designed for a different audience. Who? Ethan, Nolan said, and eventually, a judge. If she tries to annul the marriage or force a post-nuptial agreement. He tapped the screen. The tone is very specific. It is not hysterical. It is clinical. Reason number 12. Dates and times. Reason number 30. Medical records. This reads like an affidavit. She is not writing this to vent. She is writing this to document. To document what? That you are the problem, Nolan said calmly. That you are the chaotic element in the stable coal ecosystem. If Ethan ever wavers, she pulls this out. Look, Ethan, she is crazy. She is spending your money. She is sick. It is a tool for coercion. Tessa leaned forward. So what do we do? Do we sue her for defamation? Not yet, Nolan said. Defamation is hard to prove between family members without public damages. And if you sue now, you tip your hand. She will destroy the evidence and claim it was a private diary. So I just let her keep building a file on me? I asked, feeling the heat rise in my face. No, Nolan said. You build a better file. He opened a notebook. You said the hostility spikes at certain times. Let us look at that. I pulled out my phone, where I had started my timeline. I got my promotion to senior manager in September. I said, Nolan wrote September. Promotion on his pad. And what did Celeste do in September? I scrolled through the photos of the dossier. Reason number 1 through 5 are dated September. That is when she started tracking my work hours. She claimed I was neglecting the home. Okay, Nolan said. You bought the house in Waverly Glen 2 years ago. When was that closing date? June 15th. 2 years ago. He checked the earlier entries in the dossier. Reason number 45. It is out of chronological order. References the house purchase mistake. She claims I overpaid and bullied Ethan into it. I saw the pattern. Every time I put down roots. I said, every time I succeeded. Exactly, Nolan said. She attacks your stability. When you get a raise, she attacks your spending. When you buy a house, she attacks your taste. When you are happy, she attacks your mental health. Why? Tessa asked. Because an independent daughter-in-law does not need the trust. Nolan said, if Madeline is successful, Ethan does not need his mother's $2 million. And if he does not need the money, she loses him. The room went silent. It was the diagnosis I had been missing. Celeste did not hate me because I was bad for Ethan. She hated me because I was good for him. I was his exit strategy. Nolan closed his notebook. My advice is this. Do not confront her yet. You need to close the loop on Ethan. What do you mean? I asked. Nolan looked at me with sympathy. If the trust requires him to be unencumbered, and he is still married to you, she has likely tried to get him to sign something to satisfy that clause. A waiver, a postnup, something that technically separates his assets from yours. Ethan would never sign a postnup. I said immediately, we talked about it before the wedding. He was offended by the idea. Nolan did not blink. People change their minds under pressure. Madeline. Especially when there is $2 million and a guilt-tripping mother involved. Ask him. But do not ask him if he signed a postnup. Ask him if he signed anything. The drive home was a blur. The timeline was burning in my mind. September. I get promoted. Celeste starts the dossier. January. The trust distribution looms. The credit card fraud begins. She was accelerating. She needed us broken, or legally separated. Before his birthday in May, I found Ethan in the garage. He was working on his bike, a vintage road bike he never rode but liked to tinker with. It was his safe space. He looked up, his hands covered in grease, and gave me a wary smile. Hey, he said, you are home late. I closed the garage door. The sudden darkness made the overhead fluorescent light hum louder. I went to see a lawyer today. Ethan, I said. He dropped the wrench. It clattered on the concrete. A lawyer? He asked, his voice cracking. Divorce lawyer? No. I said, a family law attorney. To understand your mother's threats. He picked up a rag and started wiping his hands, scrubbing hard at a spot of grease that was already gone. Maddie, please, can we just let it go? I talked to her. She is calming down. I stepped closer. He looked terrified, not like a man who was guilty of cheating, but like a child who had broken a vase. Ethan, I said, my voice soft but firm. I know about the trust. He froze. His eyes darted to mine. I know about the clause, I continued. I know you get $2 million when you turn 35, but only if you are unencumbered by marital claims. He slumped against the workbench. Marjorie told you. Yes, she did. And it explains everything. It explains why she is manufacturing debt in my name. She wants to prove I'm a liability so she can withhold the money. Ethan looked at the floor. She mentioned the money. She said she was worried you would take half of it if we ever split. And what did you say? I told her we were not going to split. Ethan pleaded. I told her I trust you. I believe you. I said, but Ethan, I need you to think. Did she ask you to sign anything? He shook his head. No postnup. I swear, not a postnup. I said, anything. A tax form, a trust acknowledgement, an update for the insurance, anything at all in the last 6 months. He frowned. He looked at the ceiling, searching his memory. He started, then stopped. There was what? Christmas, he said slowly. The day after. We were having brandy in the library. Just me and her. You were asleep. And? She brought out some papers for the estate planning. She said the lawyers needed to update the beneficiary details because of tax law changes. Something about asset protection. Did you read it? I asked. My heart pounding. I skimmed it, he said, looking defensive. It was standard stuff. Legalese. To protect the Cole family legacy. That kind of thing. She was crying. Maddie. She was talking about how Dad worked so hard for this money, and she just wanted to make sure it was safe. And you signed it? He nodded. I just wanted her to stop crying. She said it was harmless, just a formality to keep the trust active. I felt a wave of sadness for him. He was 34 years old, and he was still a little boy trying to wipe his mother's tears. Where is it? I asked. Do you have a copy? He pointed to a plastic bin on the top shelf of the shelving unit. She gave me a copy in a sealed envelope, said to keep it safe with our passports. I threw it in the bin. I grabbed the stepladder. I climbed up and pulled down the dusty bin. Inside, beneath a stack of old warranties and instruction manuals, was a cream-colored envelope. I climbed down. I opened it. It was 3 pages long. The title was innocuous. Cole Family Asset Protection Acknowledgement. But as I read the text, the legal training I had picked up from working with contracts kicked in. The undersigned beneficiary agrees that any distributions from the trust shall be considered separate property and shall not be commingled with marital assets. The undersigned further waives any right to use trust funds for the benefit of any spouse's debts, liabilities, or joint ventures. The undersigned acknowledges that in the event of a dissolution of marriage, the trust assets are excluded from the marital estate. It was a post-nuptial agreement. It was hidden in flowery language about legacy and protection, but the legal mechanism was clear. He had signed away my right to ever touch that money, even if we used it to buy a house, even if we invested it together, but that was not the worst part. I turned to the last page. The beneficiary agrees that the administrator, Celeste Cole, shall have sole discretion to determine if the beneficiary's spouse constitutes a financial risk to the estate. If such risk is determined, distributions may be suspended. I looked at Ethan. He was watching me, his face pale. "You gave her the gun." I whispered. "What?" he asked. "You signed a clause that says she can cut you off if she decides I'm a financial risk." Ethan grabbed the paper. "That is not what it said. She said it was just about taxes. Read paragraph 4. "Ethan," I snapped, "sole discretion, financial risk." He read it. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "This is why she created the dossier," I said, the pieces locking together with a terrifying click. "This is why she forged the credit card debt. She needs proof that I'm a financial risk. Once she has enough reasons, she can invoke this clause, she can keep the money forever, and she can tell you it is my fault." Ethan dropped the paper. He looked sick. I did not know. "Maddie, I swear. She tricked me." I looked at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him, but I saw the shame in his eyes. It was deep and corrosive. He knew he had been weak. He knew he had sold me out for a quiet evening and a glass of brandy. He was not evil. He was just pathetic. And Celeste had weaponized his pathetic desire to please her. "She has been planning this for months," he whispered. "Since Christmas? Since before that?" I said, "Since the day I got promoted." I walked over to the workbench and leaned against it. I felt drained. "We are going to fix this," I said, but not by asking her nicely. "How?" Ethan asked. "She has my signature. Signatures can be contested if they were obtained under duress or fraud." I said, "But we need more than that. We need to prove she is acting in bad faith." I looked at the Larkspur consulting notes I had made earlier. "I need your laptop." I said, "Why?" "Because she printed that dossier through a company called Larkspur. I want to see if she has sent you anything from that domain." Ethan ran into the house and brought back his laptop. We sat on the cold garage floor, surrounded by the smell of oil and rubber. I opened his email client. I searched for Larkspur. Nothing. I searched for Celeste. Hundreds of emails. "Sunday dinner. Did you get my text? Thinking of you." I searched for the address I had found on the business registry. 420 Elm Street. Nothing. I sat back, frustrated. She was careful. Then I remembered the print shop girl. The Larkspur account has a strict privacy flag. Authorized signatories. I looked at Ethan. "Do you have any other email addresses?" "Old ones?" "Just my college one," he said, "and the one I use for gaming. Check them." He logged into his old university account. Nothing. He logged into his gaming email. Nothing. Think, Ethan, has she ever asked you to forward something? Has she ever asked to use your email for something? He rubbed his temples. "No." "Wait, back in November. She said her iPad was acting up and she needed to verify a login for some family photo cloud account. She asked for my verification code." "What account?" "I do not know." "Google, I think? Or Apple?" I grabbed the laptop. "Log into your Google account settings. Look at the security tab." He clicked through. Security, your devices. There were 3 devices listed. Ethan's iPhone, Ethan's MacBook, Windows PC, Chrome browser. Last active. 2 hours ago. "Who uses a Windows PC?" I asked. "I do not know." Ethan said, "I use Mac." "Celeste uses a PC." I said. I clicked on forwarding and POP/IMAP. There it was. A single line of text that had been buried in the settings. Invisible unless you looked for it. Forward a copy of incoming mail to admin.larkspur-consulting.com. I stared at the screen. She was not just sending emails to Larkspur. She was forwarding his emails to Larkspur. She has been reading everything. I whispered, every confirmation code, every bank alert, every private message. Ethan looked at the screen, his face crumbling. She is spying on me? No. I said, it is worse than that. I clicked on the sent folder. There were emails sent from Ethan's account that he had not written. Emails to the bank requesting limit increases. Emails to the credit card company confirming the Oak Street address change. She is not just spying. Ethan, she is impersonating you. I opened one of the sent emails. It was dated January 15th. It was addressed to a private email address I did not recognize. ec_privateprotonmail.com. Subject: the waiver. Body: here is the signed copy. Mom, thanks for handling the details. I feel much better knowing the assets are protected from Maddie's debt issues. Ethan gasped. I never wrote that. I never said that. I looked at the timestamp. January 15th. The same day the anarchist donation was made. She created a paper trail. I said, my voice trembling with rage, she sent an email from your account, to a private account she controls, to make it look like you were the one concerned about my debts. She was framing me, and she was using Ethan as the puppet to do it. If we go to court, I said, she produces this email, and it looks like you are on her side. It looks like you agree that I'm a financial disaster. Ethan stood up. He kicked the tool chest. The metal clang echoed through the garage. I am going to kill her, he shouted. I am going to drive up there and burn that house down. Sit down, I commanded. He stopped, breathing hard. You are not going to burn anything, I said, because that is exactly what she wants. She wants reason number 49. Ethan is unstable and needs his mother's protection. I stood up and closed the laptop. We have her. I said, what? She got sloppy. I said, she left a digital footprint. Impersonating someone else to commit fraud is a felony. Accessing a computer without authorization is a felony. I looked at Ethan. But to use this, you have to be willing to destroy her. You have to be willing to stand in a room and call your mother a criminal. Ethan looked at me. He looked at the laptop. He looked at the asset protection waiver in the bin. The shame in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by something colder, something that looked a lot like the expression I had seen in the mirror that morning. She used me, he said. She made me look like I betrayed you. He picked up the wrench he had dropped. He placed it carefully back on the rack. Tell me what to do. Maddie, he said. I picked up the laptop. First, I said, we change every password you have. Then, we call Nolan Vance. And then, I said, looking at the dark driveway that led to the street, we invite her to lunch. She wants a performance? We are going to give her one she will never forget. The fluorescent light of the garage hummed, a low electric drone that seemed to vibrate in the space between Ethan and me. The air smelled of gasoline and old cardboard. I had laid the evidence out on the workbench, displacing his wrenches and screwdrivers. It was a tableau of betrayal. The credit report with the Oak Street address, the forwarded email settings on the laptop screen, the asset protection acknowledgement dragged from the dust of the storage bin, and the digital receipt for the donation to the anarchist group. Ethan stood with his back to the garage door, looking at the display like a man staring at his own autopsy photos. I need you to look at this. Ethan, I said. My voice was not loud. I had passed the point of screaming hours ago. Screaming is for when you think there is a misunderstanding. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a demolition. He stepped forward, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He touched the edge of the credit report. I told you, Maddie, he said, his voice ragged. I did not open that card. I know you did not. I said, But you gave her the keys to the kingdom so she could. I picked up the laptop and turned the screen toward him. Look at the date the forwarding rule was created. I said, November 12th, 2 months ago. Ethan squinted at the screen. November, he whispered. Tell me what happened in November. Ethan, he rubbed his face with grease-stained hands, leaving a smudge on his cheek that made him look like a bruised child. She called me, he said. It was late. You were in Chicago for the logistics conference. She was panic-stricken. She said there had been a breach. A breach? She said someone had tried to hack Dad's old trust accounts. She said the lawyers needed immediate verification of my identity to lock down the assets before the hackers drained them. She was crying. Maddie. She said she could not lose Dad's money. She said she needed my Google login to authenticate the device because the two-factor codes were going to my old phone number, the one she pays for. I stared at him. It was so clumsy, yet so perfectly tailored to his weaknesses. Fear, guilt, the ghost of his father. So you gave it to her, I said. I gave her the password, he admitted, looking at the floor, and the authentication code she sent to my phone. She said she would log out as soon as the lawyers secured the account, but she never logged out. I said. He shook his head. I asked her about it a week later. She said it was handled. I assumed she meant she had logged out. I never checked the settings. I closed the laptop with a snap. She did not just log in. Ethan. She moved in. She set up a forwarding rule so that every email you received, every bank alert, every password reset, every private message from me, went straight to a server she controls. She has been wearing you like a digital mask for 2 months. I pointed to the fake email sent to the private Proton mail account. She wrote this, I said. She wrote, thanks for handling the details. Mom, she wrote Maddie's debt issues. She created a conversation between you and her that never happened, using your own account, so that if this ever goes to court, she can print this out and say, see? Even her husband knew she was drowning in debt. Ethan looked at the email again. His face went from pale to a sick, mottled gray. She is framing you, he whispered. But she is using me to do it. He leaned back against the workbench, sliding down until he was crouching on the concrete floor. His head in his hands. I am so sorry. Maddie, I am so stupid. I looked down at him. I could have kicked him. I could have told him that his cowardice had cost us everything, but that would have been emotional. And emotion was exactly what Celeste was counting on. She wanted me to break him so she could pick up the pieces. I knelt down in front of him. I took his hands and pulled them away from his face. Listen to me, I said. You are not stupid. You were manipulated by a professional. But the pity party ends now. He looked at me, his eyes red. What do we do? We take the keys back. I said. The next morning, I met with Nolan Vance again. This time, Ethan was not with me. I needed to strategize without managing Ethan's guilt. Nolan listened to the update, his pen tapping a silent rhythm on his legal pad. When I finished explaining the email forwarding and the unauthorized access, he stopped tapping. This changes the landscape, Nolan said. This moves from family drama to criminal fraud. Identity theft, unlawful access to a computer system, wire fraud, potentially. Can we have her arrested? I asked. Nolan leaned back. You could file a police report. It would certainly start a war. But consider the optics. A daughter-in-law having the matriarch of a prominent family arrested? Without a smoking gun that links her directly to the keyboard, which we do not have yet, only circumstantial evidence, it becomes a messy public spectacle. And if Ethan wobbles, if he refuses to testify against his mother, the police will drop it as a civil matter. So what is the play? Containment, Nolan said. An entrapment. He drew a circle on his pad. She is operating in the dark because she thinks you are in the dark, he said. She thinks you are reacting to the chaos she is creating. She expects you to be emotional, erratic, and paranoid. That is the narrative she is writing for you. So I stopped being paranoid. I said, you become the most boring, predictable, bureaucratic person on earth. Nolan said, you do not threaten her. You do not scream at her. You do not send her angry texts. You starve her of drama. And in the meantime, we lock the doors. I spent the next 48 hours executing a digital scorched earth policy. I did not do it dramatically. I did not announce it. I simply acted. I sat with Ethan and we reset every password: email, banking, social media, the utility bills, the mortgage portal. We enabled hardware security keys, physical USB sticks required to log in, so that even if she had his password, she could not get in without the key in his pocket. We called the credit bureaus. We froze our reports. We put a fraud alert on my social security number and his. We called the bank and closed the joint account she had access to, moving the funds to a new institution she had no relationship with. We did not ask for permission. We did not explain. We just cut the lines. Then, I printed the access logs. I created a folder named Unauthorized Access, January. I documented the IP addresses. I documented the times. I built my own dossier. The silence from the big house on the hill was deafening. For 2 days, nothing happened. Celeste must have tried to log in to check Ethan's email. She must have seen the access denied message. She must have tried to use the credit card on Oak Street and seen transaction declined. She knew we knew, but she could not ask. To ask, "Why can I not access your email?" would be to admit she had been spying. So she waited. And then she pivoted. On Thursday morning, a courier arrived at my office. It was not a threat this time. It was a bouquet of white hydrangeas, my favorite flower, a detail she knew and usually ignored. There was a card. The handwriting was looped and elegant. Madeline, I feel there has been a terrible distance between us lately. I fear I've been overbearing. I only want what is best for Ethan, and sometimes I express that clumsily. Can we start over? Lunch? Just us girls? Juniper and Stone? Friday at noon? Celeste? I showed the card to Tessa. It is a trap, Tessa said, sniffing the flowers suspiciously. There is probably a microphone in the vase. It is definitely a trap. I agreed. Juniper and Stone is the most public, high-end spot in town. It is where you go to be seen. Why does she want to be seen with you? Because she wants to show the town that she is trying, I said. And she wants to see if I will crack. I called Nolan. Go, he said. But bring your armor. She realizes she lost the digital access. She needs a new source of information. She's going to try to get you to say something she can use. So I went. Juniper and Stone was an airy, glass-walled bistro with white tablecloths and waiters who whispered. The lunch crowd was the power set of Waverly Glen. Ladies who lunched, lawyers who billed, and socialites who judged. Celeste was waiting at a corner table. She was wearing a soft lilac suit, looking fragile and grandmotherly. When she saw me, she stood up and offered a tentative, trembling smile. Madeline, she said, her voice soft. Thank you for coming. I did not hug her. I sat down and placed my purse on the chair next to me. Hello? Celeste, I said. She sat down and sighed, smoothing her napkin. You look tired. Dear, are you working too hard? I am working the standard amount, I said. She nodded, looking at me with mournful eyes. I worry about you. I worry about the stress. You know, I was looking at old photos of you and Ethan from the wedding. You looked so light then. Now, there is a heaviness. Gravity affects us all. I said, picking up the menu. She paused. She was waiting for me to engage. To say I am heavy because you are stalking me. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. I want to apologize. Madeline, she said, I know I can be particular. Ethan tells me I'm difficult. Ethan loves you very much. I said, but I feel I have hurt you. She pressed. I feel like there is tension. Is it the money? Is it the trust? I looked at her hand on mine. I looked at her face, and then I looked at her phone. It was lying face up on the table, right next to the bread basket. The screen was black, but the top edge was pointing directly at me. I knew that model of phone. The microphone was at the top. She was recording. She wanted me to say, "Yes, it is the money. I want the money," or "I hate the trust." She wanted a soundbite to play for Ethan, or the lawyers, or the judge. Reason number 32. She is obsessed with the family wealth. I gently withdrew my hand and folded it in my lap. "I am not sure what you mean." "Celeste," I said, my voice flat and devoid of inflection. "We are very grateful for the family's generosity." Her eyes flickered. She had missed the hook. "But surely you feel the pressure?" She tried again. "The cost of the house? The repairs? I heard you were having trouble with the roof. It must be expensive." "The roof is fine," I said. "We had it inspected in October." She took a sip of water, frustration rippling behind her mask. "You know," she said, leaning in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I remember when I was your age. I felt so trapped. I remember telling my mother-in-law that I wished I could just run away. Do you ever feel that way, Madeline? Like you just want to leave Ethan and start over?" It was such a blatant bait. She was practically begging me to say yes. I looked her in the eye. "I am very committed to my marriage. Celeste, Ethan and I are planning a summer trip to the coast." She stiffened. The waiter arrived to take our order. We ordered salads. The silence that followed was thick. She tried a different angle. "I was thinking about that weekend you went to Cabo." She said suddenly. I blinked. "Cabo?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "Last year. When you went with your girlfriends, you came back so tan. You told me you met that charming man at the bar. What was his name? Julian?" I stared at her. I had never been to Cabo. I had never met a man named Julian. "I went to a yoga retreat in Vermont last year." "Celeste," I said slowly, "with Tessa. It rained the whole time." She looked confused for a split second, a genuine glitch in her performance. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. "Perhaps I am confusing it with something else. My memory is not what it used to be." But the mistake hung in the air. Cabo, Julian. It was specific. It was a detailed narrative. And then it hit me. The dossier. The 47 reasons. Some of the reasons had felt weirdly generic, or slightly off. Reason number 12. She is flirtatious with waitstaff. Reason number 29. She drinks tequila to excess. I hate tequila. I drink wine. She was not just inventing lies about me. She was recycling lies she had used on someone else. I kept my face blank. "Must be someone else," I said. The rest of the lunch was a stalemate. She probed. I deflected with boring facts. She hinted at my mental fragility. I talked about my cholesterol levels. She tried to bring up Ethan's unhappiness. I talked about his new cycling record. By the time the check came, she looked exhausted. Her prey refused to bleed. We walked out of the bistro into the bright afternoon sun. The valet was fetching her car. She turned to me, and the mask slipped. The fragile grandmother vanished. The eyes that looked at me were hard, cold, and reptilian. "You think you are clever." "Madeline," she said, her voice low enough that the couple passing by could not hear. "I think I am prepared." I said. "You froze the accounts," she said. "You locked me out." "We updated our security," I corrected. "Standard practice." She stepped closer. "You are making a mistake. You are trying to play a game you cannot afford. I have been protecting this family for 40 years. I have removed problems much bigger than you." "Is that what happened to Sienna?" I asked. The name slipped out before I could check it. It was a guess, a hunch based on the Cabo comment. Sienna Blake was Ethan's serious girlfriend before me. They had dated for 3 years. They broke up abruptly. Ethan never talked about it. Celeste froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then snapped shut. "Sienna was a lovely girl," she said, her voice icy. She just realized she was not cut out for this life. She decided to move on. Did she decide? I asked. Or did she get a list of reasons too? Celeste's face twisted, a flash of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You are unemployable in this town if I make a few calls." "Madeline," she hissed, "I know the board of your company. I know the bank. I can have you flagged as a fraud risk by tomorrow morning. I can bury you in so much paper you will never breathe again. It was a terrifying threat. In Waverly Glen, Celeste Cole had the power to destroy reputations. But I was not terrified. I was relieved. She had finally said it out loud. I looked at her, and I smiled. A real smile. You should check your sources. Celeste, I said, and you should check your email outbox. What? She snapped. The forwarded emails, I said. The identity theft. The credit card fraud on Oak Street. I leaned in close, mirroring her posture. I did not just freeze the accounts. Celeste, I downloaded the logs. I have the IP addresses. I have the timestamps. I have the fake emails you sent from Ethan's account. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear. I have copies of everything. I whispered, in a cloud server you cannot access, with a lawyer you cannot buy. The valet pulled up in her silver Mercedes. He jumped out and held the door open. Your car. Mrs. Cole, he said cheerfully. Celeste did not move. She stared at me. For the first time since I had met her, she looked unsure. She looked like a woman who had reached for a weapon and found an empty holster. Drive safely. Celeste, I said. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. My legs were shaking. But my head was high. I walked 3 blocks before I stopped and leaned against a brick wall to breathe. Sienna Blake. I needed to find her. I pulled out my phone and called Tessa. Tessa, I said, I need you to find Sienna Blake, Ethan's ex. Why? Tessa asked. Because Celeste confused me with her. I said, she mentioned Cabo. She mentioned a guy named Julian. That wasn't me. That was Sienna. So, I said, watching the traffic pass by. If Celeste used the same playbook on Sienna, then Sienna is not just an ex-girlfriend, she is a witness. I went back to the office, but I could not focus on logistics. I spent the afternoon searching for Sienna Blake. She was not on Instagram. She was not on LinkedIn. It was like she had been scrubbed from the internet. Finally, I found an old wedding announcement for a cousin of Ethan's from 5 years ago. Sienna was listed as a bridesmaid. I searched the archives of the local paper. 10 years ago, Sienna Blake had been a rising star at a local marketing firm. Then, nothing. I dug deeper. I found a court docket from 8 years ago. Blake versus Cole, a civil suit, dismissed with prejudice. Dismissed with prejudice usually meant a settlement. It meant a non-disclosure agreement. I sent the docket number to Nolan. Can you pull this file? Nolan replied, 10 minutes later, sealed, but I can see the attorneys of record. Sienna was represented by a guy named Marcus Thorne. He's retired now, lives in Florida. I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the afternoon. I did not have Marcus Thorne's number, but I had the internet. I found an address in Boca Raton. I found a landline. I dialed. A man answered. His voice was gravelly and old. Hello? Mr. Thorne? I asked. My name is Madeline Coleman. I am the wife of Ethan Cole. There was a long silence on the other end. I do not know that name, he said. The tone was practiced. It was the tone of a lawyer who had signed an NDA. I am not asking about the settlement. I said quickly, I am asking about a document, a list. Maybe it was titled 30 Reasons? Or 50? The silence stretched. I could hear a clock ticking in the background in Florida. 47. The old man said softly. It was 47 reasons. My breath hitched. She gave one to Sienna too? I asked. She gives them to everyone she wants to erase, he said. It is her signature. Did Sienna sign the waiver? I asked. The asset protection waiver? Mr. Thorne sighed. It sounded like a rattle in his chest. Sienna did not just sign the waiver. Mrs. Cole? She signed a confession. Celeste threatened to release the dossier to her employer. It alleged embezzlement. It was all fake. Of course. But Sienna was young. She was scared. She signed everything just to make it stop. And then Celeste destroyed her anyway. He said, she sent the file to the licensing board. Sienna lost her certification. She moved to Oregon to teach yoga. She never worked in marketing again. I felt a cold chill settle in my bones. This was not a game. This was a slaughter. Celeste did not just want to win. She wanted to annihilate. She is doing it to me. I said, then run. The old man said, run while you still have a name. I ended the call. I sat in my office as the sun went down. The shadows lengthened across my desk. I thought about running. I thought about packing a bag, grabbing Ethan, and disappearing. But then I looked at the white envelope on my desk. Reason number 48. If you push back, you will regret it. Sienna had run. She had signed the papers. She had tried to escape, and Celeste had hunted her down anyway. Running did not work. Surrender did not work. There was only one way out. I had to finish the story Celeste had started, but I had to change the ending. I picked up my phone and called Ethan. Where are you? I asked. I'm at home, he said. I'm changing the locks on the back door. I found a key missing. Good. I said, listen to me. We are going to have a dinner party. A dinner party? Are you crazy? Not a party. I said, a family meeting. With who? Everyone. I said, Marjorie, your cousins, the aunts, and Celeste. She will not come, Ethan said. She knows we are on to her. She will come, I said, because I am going to send her an invitation she cannot refuse. What invitation? I am going to tell her that I am ready to sign the waiver. I said. Ethan was silent. You are going to sign it? No, I said, looking at the blinking cursor on my computer screen where I had started my counterfile. I am going to read it, and I am going to read a few other things too. I hung up. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the file, Cole Family Review, the one I had reconstructed from the photos. I hit print. The printer whirred to life, 47 pages. I watched them stack up in the tray. It was time to publish. Marjorie's dining room was the polar opposite of the Cole estate, where Celeste's home was a museum of mahogany and velvet. Marjorie's condo was glass, steel, and ruthless modernism. The table was a slab of polished concrete. The chairs were stiff, Italian leather. The lighting was recessed and unforgiving. There were no shadows to hide in. It was the perfect venue for a deposition. We had framed the evening as a fresh start dinner. Marjorie had invited the core of the family, Uncle Robert, who managed the family's investments but had no spine, Cousin Eleanor, the family gossip who functioned as a human broadcasting tower, and of course, Celeste. Ethan and I arrived 20 minutes early. Ethan was wearing a suit, but he looked like he was going to a funeral. He was pale, and he kept touching his tie, adjusting the knot until I thought he might choke himself. Just breathe, I told him, placing my hand on his arm. You do not have to be the hero tonight, Ethan. You just have to be a witness. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I never thought it would come to this. It came to this the moment she printed the first page. I said, I was holding a black binder. It was a standard, 1-inch office binder I had taken from my supply closet at work. It contained 20 pages of clear plastic sleeves. Inside those sleeves were the receipts of my life. The doorbell rang at 7 o'clock sharp. Celeste entered wearing a soft cashmere wrap in a shade of pale peach that made her look maternal and non-threatening. She carried a bottle of wine in a small gift bag. She kissed Marjorie on the cheek, waved to Robert and Eleanor, and then turned to me. Madeline, she said, her voice dripping with tentative hope. You look lovely. I am so glad we are doing this. She looked at the binder in my hand. Her eyes lingered on it for a fraction of a second, then flicked away. I am glad too. Celeste, I said, we are overdue for a real conversation. We sat down. Marjorie had ordered catering, a neutral spread of roasted salmon and vegetables, because she refused to cook for a war council. The clinking of silverware on the artisanal ceramic plates was the only sound for the first 10 minutes. So, Uncle Robert said, clearing his throat, I hear the market is volatile this quarter. How is the logistics business? Madeline? It is precise, I said, taking a sip of water. In logistics, if you lose track of a package, you do not just guess where it went. You track it. You audit the trail. Celeste smiled tight-lipped. Well, Let us not talk about work. This is a family dinner. We are here to heal. She turned to Ethan. Ethan, darling, have you thought about that summer rental in the vineyard? I saw a listing that would be perfect for you and Madeline. My treat. A little getaway to reconnect. Ethan looked at his plate. He did not answer. Celeste's smile faltered. She looked at me. Is something wrong? She asked. The air feels very heavy. I set my fork down. I picked up the black binder from the floor and placed it on the concrete table. The sound was a dull thud, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gavel. We are not going to the vineyard. Celeste, I said, and we are not here to heal. Not yet. Celeste laughed. A nervous, tinkling sound. Oh, Madeline. Do not be dramatic. Is that a scrapbook? I opened the binder. I turned to the first tab. It was a high-resolution photo of the watermark I had found on the dossier. The Gilded Press, Waverly Glen. I am going to ask you a series of questions. Celeste, I said, my voice steady and professional. I do not want stories. I do not want tears. I just want you to answer yes or no. Celeste looked at Robert and Eleanor. She put a hand to her chest. Is this an interrogation? Marjorie. Really? Marjorie took a sip of her wine. She looked bored. I think you should answer the question. Celeste. I pointed to the photo in the binder. Did you hire the Gilded Press to print a document titled 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You? Celeste's face hardened. She looked at the photo. Then at Ethan. I printed a private journal, she said. It was for my own therapy. I was venting. I never intended for you to see it. Yes or no? Celeste, I said, did you print it? Yes, she snapped. But it was private. You violated my privacy by reading it. I kept reading. Exhibit B, the invoice from the print shop, billing Larkspur Consulting Group. Did you bill this printing job to a company called Larkspur Consulting Group? I asked. Celeste waved a hand. That is just a shell for tax purposes. Everyone does it. Robert, you have an LLC for the boat. Do you not? Robert looked uncomfortable. That is different. Celeste. I turned the page again. Exhibit C. The Secretary of State registration for Larkspur Consulting, and below it, the credit report for Madeline Coleman. I pointed to the address on the credit report. 88 Oak Street. Did you use the Larkspur entity to open a credit card in my name? Using this address? I asked. Celeste gasped. She looked at Eleanor. This is absurd. She is accusing me of identity theft? I would never do such a thing. I flipped forward. Exhibit D. The transaction log. A donation of $500 to the Anarchist Collective. This donation was cited in your dossier as reason number 42. I said, you claimed I made it, but the donation was made with the card registered to Oak Street, the card you just denied knowing about. I looked her in the eye. How did you know about a donation on a secret credit card? Celeste. Unless you were the one holding the card? Celeste's eyes darted around the room. She was calculating. She realized the denial would not hold. The logic was a trap. She stammered. I hired a private investigator. That is how I knew. He must have found the card. He must have made the donation to test the account. I did not know he did that. I was just trying to protect Ethan. She turned to Ethan, tears suddenly welling up in her eyes. It was a masterful performance. Her chin trembled. Ethan, please, she sobbed. I was so worried. I heard rumors. People said Madeline was in debt. They said she was unstable. I just wanted to know the truth. I hired a man to look into it, and he gave me this file. If he did something illegal, I did not know. I am just a mother trying to save her son. She reached for Ethan's hand. You know I would never hurt you. She pleaded. I was trying to save you from a mistake. Ethan did not take her hand. He looked at her, and for the first time in his life, he did not look like he wanted to fix her. He looked tired. He spoke, his voice quiet. You did not hire an investigator. Mom. Celeste froze. Of course I did. No. Ethan said, you did it yourself. How can you say that? She cried. Because you used my computer, he said. The room went dead silent. Eleanor stopped chewing. Robert put down his wine glass. Ethan looked at the table. "You called me in November," he said. "You said there was a security breach on Dad's trust account. You said you needed my Google login to verify the assets. You were crying then, too. You said you were scared." Celeste stiffened. "That was real. There was a breach." "There was no breach," Ethan said, lifting his head to look at her. "I checked with the bank. No one tried to access the trust in November. You made it up so I would give you my password." "Ethan," she started, her voice warning. "I gave you the password," he continued, his voice shaking slightly. "And you used it to set up a forwarding rule. You have been reading every email I get for 2 months. You have been sending emails from my account to yourself to create a paper trail." He pointed to the binder. "I saw the emails. Mom, you wrote to yourself pretending to be me. You thanked yourself for protecting me from Madeline." Ethan's face was red with shame, but he did not look away. "I let you do it," he said. "I gave you the access because I was too much of a coward to tell you to back off. But I am not going to let you lie about it in front of the family. You did not hire anyone. You did this. You—" Celeste stared at him. The tears evaporated instantly. The mask of the grieving mother vanished, replaced by the cold, hard face of the woman who ran the Cole family. She straightened her spine. She brushed a piece of lint off her peach wrap. "Well," she said. Her voice was completely different. It was crisp, businesslike. "If I had to take extreme measures, it was because the threat was extreme." She looked at me with pure venom. "You are a financial liability. Madeline, you always have been. You come from nothing. You married into this family, and suddenly you have a new car, a house, vacations. You are bleeding him dry." I opened the binder to the next section. Exhibit E, the profit and loss statement of the Coleman Cole household. "I am glad you brought that up," I said. I slid a single sheet of paper across the concrete table toward Uncle Robert. He was the money man. He would understand this. "Robert," I said, "look at the income column." Robert put on his reading glasses. He squinted at the spreadsheet. He looked up, surprised. "Madeline earns 65% of the household income?" I nodded. "I pay the mortgage. I pay the car leases. I pay the insurance. Ethan's salary goes to his student loans and his personal savings." I turned to Celeste. "I am not bleeding him dry." "Celeste, I am subsidizing him." Celeste's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "That is a lie. Those numbers are doctored." Robert shook his head. "These are tax returns." "Celeste, certified copies. You cannot doctor these." Celeste slammed her hand on the table. "It does not matter," she shouted. She lost her composure. The elegance was gone. "It is not about the salary. It is about the intent. She is a predator. She is waiting for the trust to vest so she can take half and leave." She stood up, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She knows about the $2 million. She knows about the clause. That is why she is still here. She is waiting for his 35th birthday." I sat perfectly still. "I do know about the clause," I said softly. I turned the page in the binder. Exhibit F, the waiver. I pulled out the document Ethan had found in the bin, the one he had signed at Christmas. "You made him sign this," I said, "to ensure that if we divorced, or if you deemed me a risk, you could withhold the money. I did it to protect the legacy." Celeste screamed. I looked at her. "You did it to control him," I said. And then Marjorie spoke. "She is right." "Celeste." We all turned to Marjorie. She was sitting at the head of the table, her face unreadable. She opened a drawer in the sideboard behind her and pulled out a yellowed folder. She tossed it onto the table next to my binder. 1998, Marjorie said. "You tried to make me sign a competency waiver. You told the lawyers I was having a breakdown because I wanted to sell my shares in the textile mill and invest in tech. You wrote a dossier on me. 2 reasons Marjorie is unfit." Marjorie looked at Robert. "You remember? Robert? She told you I was drinking? She told you I was seeing a psychiatrist who recommended institutionalization." Robert looked down at his hands. I remember you were having a hard time." "Marjorie, I was grieving my husband, Marjorie snapped, and she used it. She tried to have me declared incompetent so she could take voting control of my shares. Marjorie looked at Celeste with a look of pure pity. It is a pattern. Robert, she does not protect the family. She eats it. The room was silent. The weight of 20 years of history hung over the table. Cousin Eleanor looked from Celeste to Marjorie, her eyes wide. The narrative was crumbling. The crazy daughter-in-law story could not survive the weight of the ruthless sister-in-law precedent. Celeste stood alone at the side of the table. She looked cornered. Her chest was heaving. She looked at the binder. She looked at the tax returns. She looked at Marjorie's folder. She realized she had lost the audience. She took a deep breath. She smoothed her hair. She reached into her bag. She did not pull out a weapon. She pulled out a pen. "Fine," she said. Her voice was tight, clipped. She looked at me. "You want to win. Madeline, you want to prove you are not a gold digger?" She reached into her bag again and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was fresh, crisp, on the heavy bond paper she loved. "Then prove it," she said. She slid the paper toward me. I looked at it. It was a voluntary renunciation. I, Madeline Coleman, hereby irrevocably waive any and all claims to the Cole Heritage Trust, both now and in the future, regardless of marital status. I acknowledge that I shall never receive, directly or indirectly, any funds from said trust. It was absolute. If I signed it, I was cutting myself off from the $2 million forever. Even if we stayed married for 50 years, even if we had 10 children, I would never see a dime. Celeste smiled, a cold, victorious smile. "If you are the breadwinner," she said, sneering the word, "and if you love him for him, and if you are not a predator, then sign it." She leaned over the table. "Sign it, and I will tear up the dossier. I will close the Larkspur account. I will fix the credit report. I will disappear from your marriage. You can have him, but you cannot have the money." It was the ultimate bargain. She was offering me peace in exchange for the fortune. Ethan looked at the paper, then he looked at me. "Maddie," he said, "you do not have to sign that." I looked at the document. It was a trap, but not the one she thought. If I signed it, I proved her point, that her money was the only thing that mattered, that she had the power to make me jump. If I refused, she would scream that I was after the gold. I picked up the paper. I felt the texture of the expensive stock. I looked at Celeste. "You think this is about money," I said. "Is it not?" she challenged. "No," I said. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the flat, boring clarity of a project manager delivering a status report. "This is about safety." I put the paper down. I did not sign it. I will not sign this. "Celeste." "Aha!" Celeste shouted, turning to Robert. "You see? She wants the money." "I am not signing it," I continued, cutting through her shout, "because I do not negotiate with terrorists." Celeste's mouth dropped open. "You committed fraud." I said, "You committed identity theft. You committed wire fraud. You stalked me. You harassed me." I placed my hand on the black binder. "I did not consult a lawyer to get a settlement. Celeste, I consulted a lawyer to stay out of prison for the crimes you tried to pin on me." I stood up. "I have already taken steps." I said, "The credit bureaus have the evidence. The bank has the evidence. My security team has the logs." I looked at her. "I do not want your money. Celeste, I make my own, but I will not sign away my rights just to make you feel safe. You are the one who is unsafe. And if you ever try to touch my life again, if you print one more page, if you open one more account, I will not come to a dinner party. I will go to the district attorney." I looked at Ethan. "We are leaving." I said. Ethan stood up. He did not look at his mother. He walked to my side. Celeste stood there, the renunciation paper lying unsigned on the concrete table. She looked at Robert, but Robert was studying his wine glass. She looked at Eleanor, but Eleanor was looking at me with a strange new respect. She looked at Marjorie. Marjorie just smiled, a thin, sharp smile. Celeste's face went blank. The rage vanished. The panic vanished. It was replaced by a void, a calculation. She picked up the paper. She folded it perfectly in half. She placed it back in her bag. She looked at me, and her eyes were dead. "Fine," she said. One word. Simple. Final. But the way she said it made the hair on my arms stand up. It was not a concession. It was a pivot. Fine meant she was done with Plan A. Fine meant she was moving to Plan B. And as we walked out of the condo into the cool night air, I realized that fine was the most dangerous word she had said all night. I held Ethan's hand in the elevator. He was shaking. "Is it over?" he asked. I looked at the digital floor numbers counting down. "No," I said, "it is just beginning." But I was wrong. I thought she would attack me again. I thought she would try another financial scheme. I did not know that fine meant she was done with money. I did not know that the next time she struck, she would not come for my wallet. She would come for my career, and she would use the one thing I could not put in a binder. 3 days after the dinner at Marjorie's condo. The other shoe dropped. It did not land with a thud. It landed with a ping. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was at my desk, reviewing a logistics schedule for a client in Denver. My Outlook calendar chimed. A meeting invite had popped up. Subject: Urgent personnel matter. From David Greer, Vice President of Human Resources. Time: immediately. I stared at the screen. David Greer did not schedule immediate meetings. David Greer scheduled quarterly reviews 3 weeks in advance. Immediate meetings meant someone was being fired, or someone had died. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my spine. "Fine," Celeste had said. I picked up my phone. I picked up my black binder, which I had started carrying with me everywhere, like a second limb. I walked to the elevator. My heels clicked on the linoleum. A rhythmic countdown. David's office was on the top floor, a glass-walled corner suite that overlooked the city. He was waiting for me. So was the company's internal legal counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah. "Sit down." "Madeline," David said. He did not smile. He looked uncomfortable. I sat. I placed the binder on my lap. "We received a complaint this morning," David said, folding his hands on his desk. "It was submitted through our anonymous ethics hotline. Usually, we filter these out if they lack substance, but this one was detailed." "How detailed?" I asked. My voice was steady. I was in project manager mode. "It alleges that you are compromised," Sarah said, speaking for the first time. "It claims you are carrying significant unreported debt that makes you a security risk for our high-value clients. It references specific amounts. It also alleges substance abuse issues that impact your decision-making." "And?" I asked. "And?" David said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "It included this." I looked at the paper. It was a photocopy of a bank statement. A statement for a credit card ending in 4491. The card registered to Oak Street. The fake card. It showed a balance of $4,000. It showed the donation to the anarchist collective. "The complaint argues that your affiliation with radical political groups violates our code of conduct regarding vendor neutrality." David said, "Madeline, you manage contracts worth millions. If you are funding groups that advocate for the disruption of commerce..." He trailed off. I looked at the paper. It was a masterful forgery of reality. To an outsider, it looked damning. A debt-ridden, radicalized employee managing millions of dollars. If I had walked into this room a week ago, I would have cried. I would have stammered. I would have looked guilty. But I was not the Madeline of a week ago. I reached into my binder. "David," I said, keeping my voice low and clinical, "before you launch a formal investigation, I need you to look at 3 documents." I pulled out the first document. It was a police report filed 5 days ago. Item 1. Police report. Case number 8920. Identity theft. I filed this last week. I said, "I discovered a fraudulent credit card opened in my name at an address I have never lived at. The police are currently investigating the IP address used to open the account." David blinked. He picked up the report. I pulled out the second document. It was the credit bureau fraud alert. Item 2. Fraud alert confirmation. I have already flagged this account as fraudulent with Equifax and TransUnion. I said, the debt is not mine. The donation is not mine. It is part of a manufactured identity created to damage my credit score. I pulled out the third document. This was the one that mattered. Item 3. The unauthorized access log. I slid the log across the desk. It showed the email forwarding rule from Ethan's account. It showed the fake email sent to the Proton mail address. The person who filed this complaint is not a whistleblower. David, I said, she is a stalker, and she is currently the subject of a criminal investigation for wire fraud and computer trespass. David and Sarah exchanged a look. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from interrogation to liability management. This complaint references financial details that only exist in the fraudulent paper trail she created. I continued, by submitting this to you, she has used corporate resources to further a harassment campaign. If the company acts on this false information, you become an accessory to that harassment. I sat back. I am the victim of a crime. David, I am handling it with law enforcement. I would appreciate it if the company would respect my privacy while the detectives do their job. Sarah, the lawyer, picked up the police report. She scanned it. She looked at the anonymous complaint. She saw the match. We will suspend the investigation pending the police outcome. She said quickly. Her tone was apologetic. Madeline, I am sorry. We have to take these allegations seriously, but this appears to be a personal matter spilling into the workplace. It is, I said, and it ends today. I walked out of the office. My knees did not shake until I was in the elevator. She had tried to get me fired. She had tried to take away my income, my reputation, and my stability. She wanted me broken. She wanted me dependent. I took out my phone. I called Nolan Vance. Book the room. I said, What room? Nolan asked. The community center. I said, The private meeting room. 7 o'clock tonight. And invite who? Everyone. I said, Ethan, Marjorie, Robert, Eleanor, and Celeste. She will not come, Nolan said. Tell her I am bringing the police report. I said, Tell her if she does not come. The next meeting will be at the precinct. She will come. I called Ethan next. She called HR. I told him. She sent the fake credit card statement to my boss. She tried to get me fired. Ethan, there was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. She what? He whispered. She used the data she stole from you to attack my career. I heard a sound I had never heard from Ethan before. It was a sound of something snapping, a brittle, dry snap. I will be there tonight, he said. The Waverly Glen Community Center was neutral ground. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was not elegant. It was bureaucratic. It was the place where people held homeowners association meetings and zoning hearings. It was a place for rules. We met in room B, a rectangular table, fluorescent lights, no wine, no food. Nolan Vance sat at the end of the table, his briefcase open. He was not there to litigate. He was there to witness. Marjorie, Robert, and Eleanor were already seated. They looked terrified. The rumor mill had been churning since the dinner. They knew something was happening, but they did not know what. Celeste arrived last. She was not wearing pastels today. She was wearing black. She looked smaller than usual. Her face was pale. Her makeup severe. She did not look at me. She sat opposite Nolan. Why are we here? She asked, her voice thin. I thought we settled this. You said you were leaving. I stood up. I placed the 47 Reasons packet in the center of the table. The original packet, the one I had taken from the nightstand, I did not leave. Celeste, I said. I prepared. I opened the packet to the first page. For weeks, you have told this family a story. I began. You told them I was unstable. You told them I was a financial risk. You told them I was bad for Ethan. And you wrote this document to prove it. I looked at the family. You have all heard whispers. Tonight, you are going to see the math. I picked up the first sheet. Reason number 12. I read aloud. She creates social scenes due to alcohol consumption. Reference, dinner at the club, November 10th. I picked up a receipt from my binder. On November 10th, I was on antibiotics for a sinus infection. I said, "Here's the prescription record from CVS. Here is the receipt for the ginger ale I drank that night." I dropped the receipt on top of the reason. Reason number 30. I read, "She is mentally fragile and seeks excessive medical attention." I picked up a letter from my doctor. These appointments were for fertility testing. I said, "We were trying to start a family. You took the dates of my appointments and framed them as a mental breakdown." I dropped the letter. Ethan flinched. He had not known she had used the fertility appointments. Reason number 42. I read, "She funds radical groups." I picked up the police report. This was funded by a credit card you opened in my name. I said, "The IP address traces back to a device logged into your Wi-Fi network." I dropped the report. I went through 10 of them, methodically, rhythmically, the lie, the receipt, the drop. The pile of paper in the center of the table grew. It was a physical manifestation of her malice. Celeste sat frozen. She stared at the pile. She could not argue. She could not gaslight. The receipts were absolute. But why? Cousin Eleanor whispered. She looked horrified. "Why would you do this, Celeste? Why make it all up?" "Because she hates me." I said, "No." The voice came from the end of the table. It was Nolan Vance. He took off his glasses. He looked at Celeste. "It is not about hate," he said quietly. "It is about the trust." Celeste's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide with panic. "Don't," she hissed. Nolan ignored her. He turned to the family. "I reviewed the Cole Heritage Trust documents this afternoon." He said, specifically, the Emergency Administrator Powers Clause. He pulled a document from his briefcase. The trust states that the administrator, Celeste, has the power to suspend distributions and take full control of the beneficiary's assets if the beneficiary is in a state of crisis. He looked at Ethan. Crisis is defined as divorce, bankruptcy, legal action, or mental incapacitation. The room went silent. "If Ethan turns 35 and is happily married," Nolan said, "the money vests. Celeste loses control. $2 million leaves her ledger. But," Nolan continued, "if Ethan is in the middle of a divorce, or if his wife is being investigated for fraud, or if there is a scandal, that is a crisis." He dropped the document on the table. "She did not write the list to convince Ethan to leave you." "Madeline," Nolan said. "She wrote the list to create the crisis." He pointed to the dossier. "This is not a diary. This is an exhibit list for a competency hearing." She wanted to trigger the crisis clause. She wanted to prove that Ethan was surrounded by chaos, so she could keep the money under her control for another 10 years. I looked at Celeste. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She was not a monster. She was just a sad, desperate woman who loved her checkbook more than her son. She manufactured the debt. I said, my voice quiet. She manufactured the drinking. She manufactured the instability, all so she could go to the trustees and say, "Look, my son is in trouble. I need to keep the money safe." I looked at Ethan. He was staring at his mother. His face was a mask of tragedy. "Is it true?" he asked. Celeste looked at him. She tried to pivot. She tried to find the tears. "I did it for you," she whispered. "You are not ready for that kind of money. Ethan, you are too soft." She would have spent it all. "I was protecting you. You were protecting your job," Ethan said. He stood up. He did not yell. He did not throw a chair. He just stood there, looking at the woman who had raised him. I kept choosing comfort over courage. He said, the line hung in the air. It was raw. It was real. "I let you talk to me like that because it was easier than fighting you," he said. "I let you criticize her because I didn't want you to criticize me. I signed your papers because I wanted to go back to watching TV." He took a breath. "I sold my wife out for a quiet life," he said, "and you used that to try and destroy her." Celeste reached out a hand. "Ethan, baby, please, I am sick. I have been feeling so dizzy lately. I think I need a doctor. I am all alone in that big house." Her eyes flicked to the table, to the trust document Nolan had laid down. She was not looking at Ethan. She was looking at the clause. She was calculating if she could still use the mental distress angle to save her position as administrator. Ethan saw the look. "You are not alone, Mom," he said. "You have your money." He turned to me. "Let's go." Maddie, we walked out of the community center. The night air was cold and clean. We stood in the parking lot. The streetlights buzzed overhead. Ethan looked at me. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a 10-year coma. He looked exhausted, but he looked awake. "I am sorry," he said. "I know that is not enough." "No," I said. "It is not." He nodded. He accepted it. "What happens now?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked at the binder in my hand. I looked at the lights of Waverly Glen twinkling in the distance. I loved him, but love was not enough anymore. Love without boundaries was just fodder for people like Celeste. "I am going to stay at a hotel tonight," I said. Ethan flinched, but he didn't argue. "Okay, and tomorrow," I said, "we are going to get a new lawyer, not Nolan, a lawyer for us." "For the divorce?" he asked, his voice breaking. "For the trust," I said. He looked confused. "We are going to petition the court to remove her as administrator," I said. "We are going to use the police report, the fraud logs, and the dossier as evidence of breach of fiduciary duty. We are going to take the control away from her. Not because we want the money, but because she cannot have the weapon anymore." "And after that?" Ethan asked. "After the legal fight?" I looked at him. "I do not know," I said honestly. I stepped closer to him. "I am not going to live under surveillance. Ethan, I am not going to live in a performance, and I am not going to be married to a man who chooses comfort over me." I touched his cheek. "You have to figure out who you are when she is not holding the leash," I said, "and until you do, I am walking my own path." I turned and walked toward my car. "Maddie," he called out. I stopped. I looked back. He was standing under the streetlight, alone. The shadows of his family legacy stretched out behind him, long and dark, but he was stepping out of them. "I will fix it," he said. "I promise." I opened my car door. "Don't fix it for me." "Ethan," I said, "fix it for you." I got in the car. I started the engine. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Ethan was still standing there. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at the ground. He was looking at the road ahead. I drove past the turn for the big house on the hill. I drove past the turn for our house. I drove toward the highway. I did not know where I was going to end up, but for the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly who was driving. The list was burned, the map was drawn, and the road was mine. Thank you so much for listening to my mother-in-law gave me 47 reasons my son should divorce you. Froze when I read it. I hope you enjoyed this journey of secrets, betrayal, and reclaiming the truth. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you never miss an episode. And tell me in the comments, do you think Madeline should give Ethan a second chance after he fights for the trust? Or is it too late? I read every single comment, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe and watch your back.